Shalom, friend of God. Welcome to day 16. We'll be talking about the second of the 10 commandments. The second commandment is Exodus 20, verse 4 to 6. I read, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. So this commandment and the first commandment are closely related. In the first commandment, God declares He is to be the only God in the beliefs and lives of His people. Who are His people? The Israelites, us, the people of God. So in this commandment, God instructs us on how to worship Him and how not to worship Him. So God knows that when man worship Him through idols and image, it demeans who He is in the mind of the worshiper. Yes, the pagan cultures in the Old Testament times, as well as in our day, worship their gods through images and idols. Some Christians also bow down to image and use the rationalization that such images make God more relevant in their mind and cause them to be more relevant to that God. So concerning this, the second commandment forbids the worship of the true God by image or anything similarity. Okay. Many heathen nations, which you know some of these nations, claims that their images were a mere figures or symbol by which the deity was worshipped by gods. So their deities, those in those nations that worship their gods through images, they claim is something that has been done, is what the deity requests for them to use as a symbol to represent them. But God has declared to us, believers, to the whole world, that such worship is a sin. So the attempt to represent the eternal one by material objects only lowers the man's conception of God. Just putting an image is like using this pen and saying this is God. It has brought down the purpose of who He is. It has lowered His capability in our mind. So the mind turned away from the infinite perfection of Jehovah. It will make the mind to turn away from the perfection of Jehovah, because there's nothing imperfect about my God. So, and then it will make us to see our God as a creature rather than a creator, such as using a pen. We will see him as the author, as a writer, rather than the, the author and finisher of the whole world. So using any kind of image, whether it be cross, whether it be image, whatever, it demeans who he is. And this conception of God using an image or any idol will mean that if we lower God, if our perception of him is lowered, so it will make man to be degraded. Because if the creator of man relevance is diminished or lowered, man become nothing. So in fact, Apostle Paul tells us that idol worship was a step towards falling away from the true God. And you'll find this in Romans 1 verse 23. So this commandment does not, the second commandment does not forbid paintings and photographs or, statuary, statuary images, because the Old Testament sanctuaries was filled with such images and representation. The problem is it's using them and bowing down to them in worship that is wrong. Yes. And it's also wrong in Africa or anywhere around the world. That image of Caesar's Borgias, that white painting that is in every church in Africa. Not every church. Most. Like when God said he created man in his image, does that look like you guys? Does that look like us? It does not. So no image or idol can truly represent God, and it will only degrade the true worship of God. Jesus also alluded to this truth when he said, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. You find this in John 4 verse 24. So this statement by Jesus also indicates that true worship will only take place when it is spirit-led and inspired. When it is spirit-led by the Holy Spirit and inspired by the Holy Spirit. So this is similar to what Apostle Paul was counseling us Christians. Pray always in the Spirit. And you'll find this in Ephesians 6 verse 18. So true prayer as well as true worship is always conducted in the Spirit. Concerning worshiping in the Spirit, our house, our temple, our house of worship may be very humble, but it is none the less acknowledged by God. It is acknowledged by our Father. So if we worship in spirit and in truth, and in the beauty of his holiness, it will to us open up the very gates of heaven that we are looking for. So once you worship in the spirit and in the beauty of the holiness, the gates of heaven is guaranteed to open up unto us. So as a lesson, of this wondrous work of God are repeated, and our hearts is filled with gratitude, which we express in prayer and in song, angels in heaven will take up the strain and unite with us in praise and thanksgiving to God. This can only happen once it is spirit led. Yes. So this exercise of praying and worshiping and dancing to God in our mind, in the spirit, in the truth, it will only open up the gates of heaven. And the angels will join us in one accord in praise and thanksgiving to the Most High God. So this good exercise also expels murmuring, complaining, and guess what? Satan loses his ground because he cannot meet us in the spirit. So worshiping God by means of images, bowing down to them, takes so much away from the experience of worshiping in the spirit. Yes, it takes it away. So the second commandment also implies that one must take seriously their worship with God. Yes, you'll find this in Ecclesiastes 5 verse 1 to 2. Let me read. Walk prudently when you go to the house of God, and draw near to hear rather than to give the sacrifice of fools. For they do not know that they do evil. Do not be rash with your mouth, and let not your heart utter anything hastily before God. For God is in heaven, and you on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. So that's why it's good to also be baptized by the Holy Spirit and speak in tongues. Because when you're firing up in the tongue, in the spirit, not only are you making, not only are you pleading or asking for what you think you know, but once you speak in the tongue, the angels intercede for you on behalf of things that you do not even know you need. The angels intercede on what is most urgent at that moment. So the Old Testament counsel also follows Jesus Christ's words closely, and you'll find this in Matthew 6 verse 7. I read, "But when ye pray, use not vain repetition, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking." So it is clear from the second commandment that ostentatious and ritualistic worship with elaborate ceremonies or attire is not God's will. Such adornment for worship takes one's focus away from the high and holy God, bringing one's sight down to the worldly vision of man's making. Apostle Paul also alludes to this truth in his letter to the Colossians. And you'll find this in Colossians 2 verse 23. I read, "These things indeed have an appearance of wisdom in self-imposed religions, false humility, and neglect of the body, but are of no value against the indulgence of the flesh." So we will continue to consider God's second commandment in tomorrow's study and devotion. This is only part one because at first glance, each commandment may seem simple. However, as we study, you will see it is more deeply in each one. There is more, each commandment is very much more deeply. And the depth of the meaning is found that they may not be obvious at first reading. This is my third time teaching this, and I'm still learning and I'm still improving myself. So, but this is the only teaching that God has led in my heart and told me to teach. Anytime I come on here, it's most likely this because every time I go on this 40 days fasting, I learn something new. It's like the words, as I'm writing, I write and write and write and write and write and write and write. And then I come on here and it's always a new revelation of love. Hi, yeah. So remember, Ecclesiastic 12 verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So, within the commandments are contained a revelation of true righteousness and condemnation of all unrighteousness. So, is a revelation of all true righteousness and it condemn the unrighteousness. So we will continue this part 2 tomorrow. And yeah, see you tomorrow. Like, share, subscribe, and follow. And check the comments and see if you got anything from this. See you tomorrow. Good night.